you check your bank account. The reading is satisfactory, perhaps slightly better than the last time you looked, in fact, which is also satisfactory. You feel safe, but you are being taxed right now. Nobody has sent you a bill, you haven't filled out any forms, nobody has knocked on your door, yet, and something else also strange, almost nobody talks about this, which is odd, considering the size of the tax. This is the story of the hidden tax. It does not appear on your paycheck, and usually takes the form of something else entirely. But it has been happening to you your whole life, and has been happening to your parents, and your grandparents, and their parents. To understand it, let's begin, as economists often do, with a question. Imagine you had $100 10 years ago. How much would you need to have today to buy the same groceries you could have bought with that 100? Always more than the 100, right? That 100 is gone, but it is not gone. Not really. Inflation is the polite term for this process. But why should it be inflation? Why should this theft take this particular form? Why, when we are talking a tax, should it not have a tax collector? It has one, in a manner of speaking. Something is happening here that makes everyone who cares about economics a little bit uncomfortable. The thing to know is that the government spends more money than it has every year, always. Which is a particular problem in and of itself, but governments have a few tricks up their sleeve to ensure this does not happen. One is raising taxes, which is a specific, targeted, and very unpopular form of earning additional revenue. Another is borrowing, which has limits, and in a manner of speaking, is a promise to raise taxes at a later date. The final option is more interesting, and is the one governments lean on more frequently when their options are limited. Money is created in secret by governments and large private banks, in carefully managed quantities. This newly created money is not distributed evenly or simultaneously throughout the economy, but rather enters at specific points first, with specific groups of people. Those groups are then able to spend this new money before prices have risen, ensuring that they receive the full value of the printed cash. This is an economic law referred to by economists as the Cantillon effect, after the 18th century thinker Richard Cantillon. The short summary is that new money favors those closest to the source of its creation and hurts the rest of the economy disproportionately with higher prices. You are always someone else's distant third-party recipient. This has enormous significance to the issue at hand, if for no other reason than the sheer scale of it. Every deposit account and savings account and cash hoard in the country is constantly, steadily declining in value as new money is introduced to the system disproportionately in favor of other classes of investment. Let's rewind now to the 1930s, to the Great Depression. John Maynard Keynes was one of the most respected economists in the world, and he had an idea about how to get the global economy out of its doldrums. His prescription led to the policies that make up the backbone of the modern economic world, in which virtually every national government has a permanently swollen budget and national debt. The Federal Reserve and other central banks exist to manage this debt responsibly and keep the system from collapsing, which it very nearly did several times over in following decades. If you want a pithy summary that captures the man's philosophy, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. If you want a proper explanation of what he meant by that, you can begin with the words, every time. Inflation is not caused by greedy shopkeepers raising prices when they have more customers than they know what to do with. Inflation is caused by governments and central banks printing more money and introducing it to the economy. Where that money goes first determines who profits most directly from the act. But virtually everywhere else, prices rise at roughly the same time, in direct response to the increased supply of currency. The real lesson to be had here is that inflation is a policy choice, made deliberately by the people responsible for managing a nation's finances, that disproportionately advantages one set of citizens over the rest. The people who owned the things that were bought with the new money saw their assets increase in value, in large part, because they had them before the money was printed, and therefore could sell them for more than they paid for them. That sounds like no particular group is being favored, but it is in fact extremely favoring one group and punishing the rest. Who was that group? The asset owners. The people who owned the houses, or the factories, or the bonds, or the resources that were purchased with the newly printed money. Who are the people who bought them? They are the people whose wages and cash savings are steadily losing value year after year after year, in slow, deliberate increments. This is a systematic built-in advantage for the rich and a disadvantage for everyone else, and it is absolutely everywhere. It is the cause for some of the most persistent economic questions in human history, the kinds that lead to phrases like, the rich should pay more taxes. It is also, in many ways, a very unfair disadvantage. To see it in operation, look at the hyperinflation that gripped Weimar Germany in the 1920s. The government was forced to print vast sums of money to pay its debts, and the money lost value consistently and rapidly. People paid their bills in bundles of notes and had to be paid twice a day because a loaf of bread cost times as much by the afternoon as it did in the morning. Savings were bled away with horrifying speed, and millions of people lived and died as paupers. That is the hidden tax at its most extreme. Virtually none of the modern world comes close to the level of destruction seen in Weimar, but the principles remain the same. The money earned by the asset owners grew with the value of the assets, wages were increased in very small amounts to reflect the increased cost of living, and the general economy was hurt in equal measure. The same principles apply in reverse to the way the economy treats the people who hold cash versus the people who hold products, services, or assets. It is worth noting that the hidden tax has historically tended to be one of the more difficult taxes to notice. In fact, you are likely to never notice it at all. Behavioral economist Richard Thaler has dedicated his life to studying the strange ways human beings think about money. One of his most notable contributions was a paper discussing how people think about prices and wages. He and his colleague Daniel Kahneman argued that human beings fall victim to something of a delusion when it comes to money. They are far more likely to think about nominal figures when it comes to thinking about how much they make or how much they spend, rather than real figures, or how much they make or spend in comparison to prices. They refer to this as the money illusion, and you might refer to it as I made more this year than I did last year, so I am doing well. Inflation is constantly lowering our wages, but we are fooled into thinking we are being paid more when we are in fact getting poorer. The system is designed, in part, to be unintuitive, and one of the ways it accomplishes this is by keeping the hidden tax largely invisible to most people. What can you do with this information? You can't vote as a way of fixing the situation the next time you get a paycheck, although that is absolutely an option. But you can do the next best thing, and make sure that you are not making the same mistake over and over again. Cash held in savings is going to steadily lose its value no matter how long it is held, and that is not a moral failing on your part, but a mathematical certainty tied to the way the system works. People who managed to get through the last few inflationary periods with their fortunes intact were rarely the ones saving large amounts of cash. They were the ones buying things that kept their value, or preferably, things that gained it. As the supply of cash increased and created a need for more goods at higher prices, they took advantage of opportunities to buy things before prices increased, and sold when the opportunity arose to earn a profit. Investor Benjamin Graham, who taught and advised Warren Buffett directly, spent his career extolling the virtues of investing in actual things in order to preserve wealth, rather than keeping it in cash. The value of cash is always changing, as the hidden tax steals away at it slowly and steadily, and he did not believe in trying to predict or manage that. He recommended avoiding the risks and headaches entirely by investing in something that would always hold its value, and in doing so, he laid out an alternative to living with the hidden tax. That is a lot to take in, and it does not mean that every aspect of your life needs to change. It does mean that you should be aware of the danger posed to cash savings, and the way it interacts with the rest of the economy. In a world where inflation steals from you without asking, without permission, and without a receipt, it is important to know when to save and when to spend. We return now to the bank account. Your balance is safe, perhaps even improving on the previous measurement, which is also safe. But you know what it does not show you now, after having read this far. It does not show you that you have already been taxed, without being notified. It does not show that you are already losing value, because virtually nobody understands the way the hidden tax works, and the way it has been built into the system. The tax was never hidden, not really. It was hidden only because it was unfamiliar. Now, having read this, you are no longer unfamiliar.